So in this session, we are going to cover the NgRx Getting Started tutorial. So it's a simple, it's the simplest tutorial that's available in this website, which is actually the official website. So to access it, you go to ngrx.io, which is the official NgRx website, and then you click on Get Started, and it will directly take you to the page. So there is a bunch of information in the beginning that you can read and look at. All right, and then they start on the tutorial. When you start reading the tutorial, they are giving you two links. So the first one, which is the final example that you're supposed to reach when you finish the tutorial, and the second one, which is the starting point from which to on which you will do the the tutorial, sorry. So which is kind of just the Angular generated app with the dependencies already prepared in the package.json that are required to work with the store. So these two links are actually links to StackBleed's applications. So I have already opened them. All right, so when you open them, it will start installing the dependencies, and then the browser side might get stuck in the starting point. So for that, you will need to launch the command ngserve to unstuck it. All right, so this link is the one which already has the final example, as you can see. So you can see my counter folder here and some counter files and some stuff in the web browser page. And the other link is the starting point. Okay, so it's a simple Angular app which has a title here, and the only difference with the generated app is that it has already the dependencies that you will need for NgRx. All right, for this tutorial. So I always prefer to work on my local VS Code instead of StackBleed's. It will allow you to work with the extensions that you already have in your IDE. So in my case, I use the Angular Language Service extension, which is an official Angular extension for VS Code, which allows you to control click from the template directly to the class file, etc. All right, so we are not going to work here. So I encourage you to download those projects in different folders. So I have already downloaded them, and I have two VS Code windows that are open. One is with the final project. All right, you see it already has the my counter folder, and the other one is the starting one. So you see one folder is called NgRx Getting Started Start and NgRx Getting Started Final. So the start one doesn't have the counter yet. All right, I also have the console a console for each a console tab opened for each folder, and I have installed the dependencies using npm install and started the apps in both of them in different ports with ngserve. All right, so I started first the final one, so it opened on the default port, which is 4200, and then I started the second one, which assigned a different port, in this case 55360. All right, so let's so here the 4200 is open, and there we will open the other one. All right, 55360. All right, so yeah, so the first tutorial is about three buttons and one label that is displayed with a number. So obviously, as you can understand, we have a number with an initial value of 0. If we increment, it will increment it by 1. If we decrement it, it will decrement it by 1. If we reset it, it will put it back to 0. All right? So very simple. And yeah, so that's the final example that we want to reach. All right. So for that, before starting on the tutorial, we are going to have a look at how the store looks like in the Redux Dev Tools. So as you can see, the Redux Dev Tools are grayed out here because it's not enabled. Even you see that we just see the stuff related to the extension itself, but we don't see the state of the app, which should be far lighter than this. So the next step will be to enable those dev tools for this app so that we can see how the store looks like. So for that, you'll have to scroll down a little bit under developer tools in the website, okay? And then you will see NgRx store dev tools and then installation. And you see that you need to do 2 steps actually. The first one is to add the store dev tools dependency, and the second one is, so obviously I mean it will be the equivalent of adding it in the package.json as mentioned here and running npm install. That's what ng-add would do. And then we'll need to add the store DevTools module with its proper configuration in the imports array of the app module. All right. So the dependency, we don't need to add it because if you check after you have downloaded the projects or in Stack Bleeds, if you look at the package.json, so for example, this is the final project, the package.json under developer dependency, under the dev dependencies, we see that we have the NgRx store dev tools. Okay, so they are already there, as well as in the starting point that you will perform the tutorial on. They are there, so we don't need that step. The only thing we need is to import the store DevTools module and add its appropriate configuration. So let's copy it and go to our final project, and then under the app module, here are the imports. Let's make it like this, and you need to add this, very important, after the store module, otherwise it won't work. All right, so let's import the isDevMod function from Angular core, and unfortunately the IDE doesn't help us with this one, so we need to help it a little bit. Let's copy the store module, paste it here, and let's import the store DevTools module from, as you've seen in the package.json, the dependency is called store DevTools. Here it is. Okay, so we should be good to go. Let's save and let's have a look. And now you see that the extension is green, and under the Redux Dev Tools we can see our state with the count. All right, so from, by the way, these 2 stack bleeds tabs, we don't need them, so we can remove them. All right, so I just want to show you that the order is very important, as I mentioned before. If I take this and put it before the store module, we don't have the store anymore. All right, so very important to put it after. All right, now we have it. Okay, let's set up the same for the starting point. So let's copy this line and let's open our app module and under the imports, let's add this. All right. We do the proper imports, and let's copy this import that we had here. All right. Okay, perfect. But you see here that we only have the store DevTools module, but we don't have the store module yet, right? Because it is part of the it's part of the tutorial. So for that reason, if we go here, we don't see the DevTools. The state that you see here is actually the state of the other app. Okay, there is not even any feature called count that is implemented here. It's just a kind of a bug in the Redux Dev Tools. Sometimes when you open a tab and you go to another tab, it's there. So you can just ignore that. But this is not related to the store of this app, but of the other tab. You can clearly see that the dev tools are not enabled here, whereas they are enabled here. Okay, perfect. So this is for the setup. So now we have all the proper setup ready. We can have a look at what happens in the final example. So what we want to reach. You see that when we click on increment, there is what we call an action that is dispatched. And we can clearly see it in the dev tools. So it's very interesting. You can see the actions and we can see the state. So you see that every time I incremented the action, the state is incremented. And from the state, we are reading, subscribing and using selectors to read from the state to display that here. All right. And if I click on decrement, you see the actions. And then if I reset counter, you see the actions. And the other thing that you can see is that for each action, you can see the difference that it applied on the state. All right. So you can see the difference. We were in the state 0 and it went from 0 to 1, from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and then 4 to 3 when we decremented, 3 to 2, and then from 2 to 0 when we dispatched the reset action. All right. You can also click on action to see what is the type of the action. So it's just the same name that you can see here. And there is another thing called the payload of the action, but these actions don't have any payload. Okay. Themselves, their type carried information on what should happen. Sometimes an action could have a payload. For example, a payload could be what would be the increment. So the increment would be by 1 or by 2 or by 3, and then it will go from 0 to 3 to 6 to whatever. But in this case, this just increment. So by default, we assume it's by 1. So the reducer itself that will react to the actions, the moment it will see the action, it will increment by 1. But it could have been dynamic and increment by the payload that comes with the action. But the goal of the tutorial is to keep it quite simple. So all the actions here do not have any payload. You will see in the next walkthrough tutorial, which is also an official tutorial here, this one that will deal with the payloads. Okay, but for now, this is quite simple. Okay, so that's the goal. So you can already get used to the Redux Dev Tools, the actions, the state, the difference that each action apply on the state. All right. And when you click on an action, it will show you the state at the time of that action. All right. So at initialization, it was 0. First action dispatched, it became 1, then 2. All right. You click again to have the latest state. You click again to unselect the action. So be careful. Sometimes you might look at the state and see that that's not the state that you're having here. It's because you selected an action. You need to unselect it. All right. And then when you increment, you will see the new state. If I select, okay, here I see 3. So if you see, even if I increment, I don't see the state changing. It's because it's showing you the state at this action. When you unselect it, it shows 7, which is what we have here. Perfect. So everything is set up. So the next step will be to do actually the proper tutorial to try to reach this stage. All right. So the tutorial starts here actually, where we'll start implementing everything. All right. All right. So now that we have everything set up with the store dev tools for both the final and the starting base, as we said, the starting base we cannot see the store. This one is related to the other tab. That's an issue from the Redux Dev Tools Chrome extension, but we already we set it up in the in the code. It's just not showing because we need the store module imported as well. We only have the store devs module dev tools module. So now that we have everything set up and we went through the the how the final result should behave in terms of action, dispatch, state updated, etc. Now we can start the tutorial. So yeah, we did these two parts where they are asking us to have the final example and the starting base, and now they are asking us to um, start coding actually by adding on the app folder a new file named counter.actions.ts. Okay, so this counter.actions.ts, that's why it's very convenient to have this final result with the DevTools open, is the one that will define the three different actions that are dispatched, which are the one that you see here: increment, decrement, and reset. All right, so let's go ahead and we can for now minimize the final app. This one will not need it, we will mainly work here. So let's go under the app folder as they're asking us, create a file, name it counter.action.ts. Okay, now they're giving us the content of the file. Let's copy it. So it's quite simple. All right, so here it is. We have three constants, one for each action. So they are created with the create action function that is imported from the NgRx store module package. All right, and we define as a parameter of the function the type, what we call the type of the action. All right, so this is what we saw here. You see, when we click on an action and click on the action tab, this is the type: counter, component, increment. Okay, so it's by convention we put always between square bracket the parts of the store, because we will usually divide when the store gets too complex. We have different parts or slices. They are usually the usually grouped by under square brackets before that, or if it's related to a specific API or to a specific component or whatever. So that's kind of a convention when creating those actions. All right, so let's come back to the code. So that's pretty much it here for the actions part. All right, coming back to the tutorial. So the actions part are what you see here in the diagram. Okay, so that's usually what a component will dispatch. So when the component gets an event such as a click on a button, then reacting to that click, it can dispatch the action. So that's what you see here. The component, the arrow is going from the component to an action, meaning that the component is dispatching an action. All right, so now the next step is to define a reducer function. Okay, so for that we will create a file called counter.reducer in the same folder, and we will copy the content here. All right, so the reducer is what happens after the action is being triggered. Okay, So we usually define an initial state. Okay, so when the reducer is created, it has the initial state, and then it has what should happen, how we should affect the state when an action happens. Okay, so if you notice, we are here importing those three actions that we added in this file. All right, we are also importing the create reducer function that will create the reducer for us, and the on function that is used here. So meaning that on the dispatch of the increment action, we take actually the store is going to call that. So we are defining here an anonymous expression, a lambda expression uh, that takes the state as a parameter. So it will be given by the store. So it will take this, and the state is a number in that case because the initial state is 0. So the type inferred here is a number. So we'll take the you clearly see here that the state is a number. So we take the state and we increment it by 1. All right. On decrement, we decrement it by 1, and on reset, okay, we put the state back to 0. So we are completely overriding the state. That's why you see here that even the value is not red. All right, so we are overriding it, putting it back to 0. All right, and this is the simple use case, as I said in the previous steps, that you have some cases where an action could have a payload, okay, meaning props, properties, or parameters, could say, and that payload, we can use it to change the logic of the reducer. Let's say we want a dynamic increment. This increment would come with the payload, which is the increment, whether it's by 2 or by 3, and then we will increment by 2 or by 3 or whatever that param was. But here it's simple. Increment, it's directly embedded in the reducer that on an increment we increment by 1 or decrement by 1. All right, so let's save these two files. Okay, nothing is happening, of course, in the app because we just created files. We didn't use them in any component or anything. Okay, so you see nothing. We don't even see any store, nothing. As I said, this is still related to the other tab. All right, so this is the reducer part. So this is what happens when the action is dispatched. The reducers are getting executed. Okay, so now that's the interesting part. Okay, they are telling us to go in the app.module.ts and do some imports. We're not gonna do them. We're gonna see if the IDE is gonna help us. Let's focus on what needs to be added. So the main part that needs to be added is this store module. So we import the store module and we configure it by creating a slice of the store, which would be count, and we refer it to the counter reducer. All right, so from there everything that we've coded will come because the reducer refers to the actions. All right, and anyway, when the actions are also going to be referred in the in the in the in the components, but the main part is the reducer and the initial state. So the moment we will do that, we should see a slice of store that will have a count slice name, and the value of it will be the initial state of the counter reducer. That, as we have seen, is this one, which is equal to 0. So let's copy this import along with the comma to save some time. Let's go to the app module, and if you remember, we need to import the store module before the store dev tools, otherwise the dev tools won't work. We saw that in the previous one with the final result. There was already the comma there, so it's not needed because we already did the store dev tools module. Let's add a comment here, and let's import the store module, and let's import the counter reducer. All right, now let's save, and you see that we didn't even touch any component. No class file of a component, no template of a component, nothing. Now, what is interesting is that we can see that the count is equal to 0, all right? And what is more interesting than that is that we have here under the in the in the Redux Dev Tools, all right, we have what we call a dispatcher, all right? So, and here under the dispatcher, all right, under the dispatcher, if you open a JSON, if we open an object and we give it the type of any action that we already defined, such as the counter component increment action, and we dispatch it, you see that we are able to increase the count. We can even click on the action, see the diff, and we see that it went from 0 to 1. All right, so if I keep dispatching it, all right, here of course it's showing 1 because I'll have this action selected. If I unselect it, it shows 4. All right, if I keep 6, right, same thing, I can try the decrement, dispatch, it goes from 6 to 3, and then the reset, and I dispatch, it goes back to 0. So all the actions are working perfectly fine, the store is fine, everything is fine. We didn't even need to write any component to use the store in any component or nothing. All right, we're able to see the state, we are able to dispatch action and to affect the state. So we know for sure, even though we didn't touch any component, we know for sure that our actions file is written properly. Our reducer initial state is fine because we saw 0, and those reducer functions are working fine. This is tested, this is 100% sure. So now let's come back to the tutorial. All right, and let's see what is the next step. So we have registered the store, and we're able to see it and test it. Now we are going to bind that with the UI so that we can have something like that where we increment, etc. So the first step is we're going to work on the UI. So they're asking us to create a folder called my counter. All right. And inside that folder, inside that folder, we're going to create a component with 2 files, the TS file and the template file. Let's create the TS file and let's create the template file. All right. Now let's copy the content of the TS. Oh, the wrong file in the TS. And here we have a component which is very simple. So it refers to a selector, app my counter, that will refer to the template that is here, simple class with the property called count dollar. So the dollar here stands for observable, meaning it's not a value, but it's a stream of values. All right, so we subscribe to it to see the numbers that we can have multiple numbers that come one after the other in the store. So the store is an observable, and we're gonna read from the store and get an observable from that. Okay, so that's why here we have an observable. So this is not part of NgRx, this is part of RxJS. It's another library for reactive programming. So, but yeah, just touching on that for people who are not comfortable with that. So it's a stream of values, meaning different values that can come at different moment in time. And we always show the current value at the time. All right. So that's why by convention, we put the dollar to clearly see that it's an observable, to know that we cannot use it directly. We need to subscribe to get its value. So either you subscribe to it in the TypeScript file or the class file using the subscribe method of the observable class, or you subscribe to it in Angular using what we call the pipe async. So we use an Angular pipe called async that will automatically subscribe and give us the value of the observable at any point in time. Perfect. So that's what we have, and we have an empty constructor and three methods: increment, decrement, reset. We need to bind this method with the template, with the HTML that's gonna put in the template, and to bind them with the store. Those methods are going to dispatch the store, so to do the same as what we did just here. All right. So we don't have any HTML yet, so let's copy the HTML that they provide us in the template file. All right, and you see that it's quite simple. It should give us something like this. So 3 buttons, and after the increment button, we have a label, current count, and a dynamic value that is dispatched here. All right, so that we see here, we have 1, 2, and 3 buttons. So we can see that when we click on the method here, it will directly take us to the TS. That's what's convenient with the Angular Language Service VS Code extension. All right, and so we can see those 3 buttons, and we can see here that we have a label current count, okay, and with the value here that is where we have an interpolation of the property count dollar, but as we said, the count dollar is an observable of numbers, so it's not a number. So for us, so it's a stream of different numbers that happen at different moment in time. So for us to have the current value, we use the pipe async, the Angular pipe called async, which will give us the value. Now let's go on with the tutorial. What we need to do is we need to register our component. We need to connect our component with the app component. All right, this is the selector. We need to declare the component in the app module. Let's import it. All right, let's save the files. Refresh the browser. Now we have our HTML here, and when we click on increment, decrement, or reset counter, nothing happens. If I dispatch from here, it works fine, but nothing happens, and we don't see the value of the observable, right? It's totally normal because it's not yet bound with the store. All right, so for that we need to inject the store first. All right, so we need to inject the store. In our component by putting it in the constructor. Let's import the store. All right, and here we give the type of the store. So usually the state is usually more complex than this, and it's put in an interface, and we put in generic type here, for example, count state the interface called count state. All right, but since it's quite simple, we directly put the type here inlined. All right, now we're going to need to read from the store and bind the store to this observable. So for that, we'll assign the store. So this dot count equals this dot store dot, and we use the select method. All right, and to the select method we pass a key which is the slide of the store that we want to display, and that is the key that we defined here when we registered our store using our reducer. So this is the key, the count that is here. All right, so let's come back here and put our key here. Fine, let's save, come back to our browser, and now we see the value 0, right? And if I dispatch the increment action, the state gets incremented, and we see in the template that the count is also following the state that we have. So that's the subscription that we have in the template with the pipe async. Now if I decrement, same thing. And if I reset, we see 0. But those buttons do not do anything. For that, we come here and we use the same store, but instead of using the select method, this time we'll use the dispatch method. All right, and in the dispatch method as a param, we will pass the action that we called increment, and we need to call the increment function that is under the action, because this is a function that will create the action. So we need to call the increment function to create the action with this type. All right, so that's why we call this function that will return to us the action. All right, that will be dispatched. All right, and we do the same for the others. Decrement and reset. All right, and we are adding all of them here. Let's save, and now let's see what happens when we click on the button, and we see that increment action is getting dispatched, decrement, and reset. All right, and the state is being updated appropriately. All right, so this concludes the tutorial on the getting started. So as you have seen, we have defined some actions, right? The increment, decrement, and reset actions. We have defined the reducer that has the logic that will be executed when those actions are getting triggered. So either the logic to increment by 1, to decrement, or to put back to 0 when we have a reset. All right, we have registered the state in the app module using the store module.for root and giving that key count and binding it with our reducer. And we have injected the store inside our component to both dispatch the actions in those 3 methods and to read from the store using the select method that returns to us an observable that we piped async to subscribe to it in the template. All right, so that concludes this this tutorial, and the next part is the walkthrough tutorial, which is a bit more complex than this one. It has a richer state and it has multiple parts of the state, so it's far more interesting.